My name is Greg Hemmings, and I'm a sailor, I'm a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, I am very interested in being involved with businesses that are doing good things in the world. I've always dreamt as a documentary filmmaker to be able to capture the beginning spirit of a group of people who are starting a business. And that's what this series is all about. A number of months ago, a bunch of friends of mine and I got together and we talked about perhaps starting a business. This series is called Victory Garage, and in this series we're going to be following us as a bunch of gearhead nerds to see if we can successfully create a business in the EV world with the desire to help preserve the culture of classic cars, but doing it in a way where we don't need to use and burn fossil fuels anymore. We might succeed, we might fail, and we will see. One way or the other, it's going to make great television. Welcome to Victory Garage. This story starts with a guy named Steve Bellier.
My name is Steve Bellier, and I'm a car guy, I think, first and foremost. They're likely going to put that on my tombstone.
So Steve is an entrepreneur. He's got this incredible engineering firm. And in fact, he was one of my very first clients as a filmmaker many, many years ago. We've done a lot of really cool film projects together, from motocross videos to music videos, and a lot of commercial videos for his engineering firm that he owns. But the most notable thing about Steve Bellier is he's an absolute vintage car nut.
I've got 13 cars, and they're all, most of them, are pre-1970. And, kind of the cars that I'm most passionate about are the vintage cars, the older cars, the muscle cars, the hot rods. So certainly pre-emissions type thing. They didn't have catalytic converters and all the emission controls that they do today. Well, that comes at a price. That comes at smelly fuel and oil leaks all over the garage floor and noisy exhaust. And you got to be in the right mood for that if you want to go out and put the hammer down and make a lot of noise, scare women and children.
So the Steve that I first met was a classic, baby boomer gearhead. The guy loved the big sounds of internal combustion engines. He loved doing burnouts. He loved big airs on motorbikes, and just like anything with big horsepower was what Steve was all about. Now, with age, similar to a fine wine, Steve has refined his desires in the automobile industry, and now he wants to keep the aesthetic of the old vintage, but do it in a way that's a little quieter, a little less messy, a little less oily. And this is why he's now become super focused on the electrification of classic cars.
I think the older I get, my interest in electric vehicles or electrifying vehicles is growing. Maybe I've had almost enough of the 800 horsepower open headers, but I think that for it to stick with the car crowd, it's got to be high performance, and there's got to be some really compelling reasons to make the switch.
So a couple of years ago, I bumped into Steve again. I hadn't seen him for a long time, and he was telling me about a project that he wanted to do about converting one of his precious classic cars into EV.
I have a truck in the collection that actually belongs to my daughter. She's of the right age to really embrace all things environmentally sound and friendly and sustainable. And I think, for me, it kind of made sense if I was going to tackle one of the vehicles, which one would I do first? And that one has a less desirable motor in it, leaks oil all over the garage floor. It's probably the worst offender that I've got. So we chatted about it, and she thought that it would make perfect sense for her to have it electrified. So I'm not sure whether she convinced me or I convinced her.
So Steve is a classic networking guy. He knows everybody. So when he wanted to figure out how to convert one of his classic cars into an EV, he started to ask around in the racing community, in the vintage car community. Does anybody know anybody that works in EV to help him out?
I'm having lunch with another friend of mine one day and kind of talking about the whole world of electrifying vintage cars and classics. And, he thought that desire of mine to kind of convert one or two of these old cars to electric made good sense.
One of Steve's racing and gearhead buddies said, "Steve, actually one of my neighbors is an EV powertrain expert, and leave it to me. I'll just send him down to your house and you guys can meet and see if you kick it off."
I'm Isaac Barkos. Greg and Steve call me the professor, and I'm an EV enthusiast. I design EV systems as my profession. I was helping out with a local race team. So at one point, they mentioned that they have this friend who was trying to convert something to electric, and that maybe I could help them out with that.
I said, sure, bring him down and we'll have a conversation, have a beer and look at my old vehicles and see what he thinks and if he's for real or not.
I thought, whatever, that's, I'll go see what's going on. And we come up to this guy's driveway, and you have to imagine that, it's really truly in the middle of nowhere. You can't see any of the other houses. And this driveway that you pull on it's just a kilometer long. And then you pull up and you see this house. It was, you have to imagine it's this mansion mounted on a cliff overlooking the ocean, all this glass, and
Isaac had no idea what he was about to drive into. When Steve started building his house, he asked me to come down and take a look. So I brought a drone down and I started to film the construction site. One of the things that was super interesting to me was this massive foundation that Steve was building into the side of a cliff face, right beside a really beautiful garage beside the house.
I meet the guy. He had a nice 4-car garage, and there are really nice cars in the garage, but there wasn't any electric vehicle stuff anywhere to be seen. We go over to a shelf that he's got kind of mounted on the wall, and there's this little antique fire alarm that he goes and he pulls. And all of a sudden you just see the shelf go to open, and you just see a tunnel going down underground. And then you just see the first light come on, cha-chunk, and the next light, cha-chunk, cha-chunk, cha-chunk. And then it opens up to a full replica of the 1950s Batcave. There was everything from antique dragsters, any type of muscle car or sports car that you could think of.
It was fun to see the reaction on Isaac's face when the garage door opened and Steve's classic car collection was there on display. But they weren't there just to talk about his classic car collection. Steve was really looking for someone to help him convert one of his cars into EV.
I needed some help. I couldn't stitch all the systems together and make them play nice together, because you had to buy a motor from one company and a battery from another company and a control unit from someone else, and this all has to work safely. So the thinking was that Isaac could team up with me and get something going and get a vehicle conversion underway. And it was apparent within minutes that this fella was the real deal. He'd been educated in electric vehicle systems engineering and was in very good position to help me with my electric conversion quest.
Yeah, so we just kind of sat down on the couches and we just kind of got to just spitballing ideas. I think both of us could kind of feel that the atmosphere there was getting electric, pun intended.
Well, the next few days, Steve and Isaac stayed in touch, talking all the time about how they might convert one of his vehicles into EV.
Even after this meeting, we just kept sending messages back and forth, trying to figure out what the first projects were going to be.
And that's where I come in.
So I first met Greg 20 years ago, roughly. And I knew Greg well enough to know that the electrification of something would be of interest to him. He's a bit of a tree hugger.
A tree hugger? Yeah, he's totally right. I'm a tree hugger.
So Greg and I get together and the conversation evolves into electric vehicles and basically the story about Isaac Barkos and the pickup truck and what I'd like to do with that.
I was immediately intrigued. See, as a sailor myself, I feel guilty every single time I turn on my diesel engine, because the exhaust goes right into this beautiful river. Sometimes there's oil leaks, and as a tree hugger myself, it just didn't make sense to me to be sailing a boat with a combustion engine. So I thought maybe this might be an opportunity for me to learn about EVs and convert my boat someday into an electrified vehicle.
And Greg's like, do you think there's a business here somewhere? Do you think that this might evolve into something that we could offer to others? And I thought, that makes sense, and there probably is. So we had the seeds of what might become a business beginning to sprout in our brains, and thought that it might make sense to gather up the three of us and have some more beer and just kind of talk this through and try and talk ourselves out of it before we did something completely silly.
Steve just said, hey, you've got to come down here again. I've got somebody that I want you to meet. Getting Greg into the room made us actually really consider, there might be an opportunity for us to not only convert our own cars, but to convert other people's cars as well, and to be able to tell that story, to educate people, and to build a narrative around preserving the culture and the heritage around the automotive industry and make these old, beautiful cars new again.
So it looked like we actually had something, It's possible we could make a business out of this. A bunch of guys who are passionate about the same thing, why not see if we can actually make a little bit of money doing it? But if we're gonna give it a try, we needed to get a lab space.
If we're going to convert 2 or 3 vehicles that belong to me, or God forbid, offer this as a service to paying customers, what might that look like? And I offered the possibility of using a couple of thousand square feet in a building that I own on Rossley Avenue, which seemed to make sense. It was a good fit. The building was built in 1911, 1912 as an automobile factory. Henry Ford financed the mortgage on the property, and a local businessman and his investors got together and they created a car called the Maritime Singer 6, which was a state-of-the-art touring car of the day, and it was one of the first cars to go from St. John to Halifax, Nova Scotia in the depth of winter. And the car became successful. The Singer Palmer Corporation bought the IP and the tooling and went on to build, I believe, 36,000 of them. That's a success story for St. John in the automobile industry. So when, the opportunity became a victory opportunity, we thought a couple thousand square feet that was underutilized in that building might make a cool shop. So in January, we came in here with a crew and began to renovate and retrofit a couple of thousand square feet of the Maritime Singer 6 building into what is now Victory Garage.
So we had a workshop set up that was really cool. We had a germ of an idea for a business, but we didn't quite yet have a business offering. So stay tuned in the next episode when the great aha moment happens. Could we be on the cusp of something huge and amazing? Or could we be on the cusp of probably the dumbest idea that any of us have ever had? Only time will tell. See you in the next episode of Victory Garage.